The Arizona sun bled across the red cliffs, casting long shadows over cracked earth. It was the summer of 1882. 3 months without a drop of rain. Sagebrush rattled dry and hollow whenever the hot wind swept down from the mesas. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Far off, the San Francisco peaks rose like tired giants, their purple outlines wavering in the heat. On the sagging porch of an abandoned ranch cabin sat Cole Boone, staring west as the sun fell behind the ridges. Though only 34, the years carved into his face made him look a decade older. The desert had etched hard lines into him, his gray eyes carrying the empty weight of a man who'd seen more than enough. His calloused hands clutched a tin cup of bitter coffee, the only indulgence he allowed himself in this exile. He called a life. The cabin crouched against the land like a wounded beast. Boards warped and splitting from neglect, the roof sagging daylight piercing through cracks in the walls. Once this place had been alive, the heart of a working cattle spread. But that was before the blood, before the night, when everything was stolen from him. Cole had built the ranch with his own hands back, when dreams still meant something, when June Belle's laughter filled the rooms, and little Tommy Lee's boots tapped across the floorboards. 5 years had passed since the range war, since the gun hands came in the dark. Now 2 crosses on a lonely hill held his family, and Cole lived with nothing but ghosts. The closest town, Redemption Creek, lay 15 miles east. He rode in only once a month, hat brim low. Folks there called him the hermit of Sunset Ridge, and that suited him fine. He wanted nothing from them, and they learned to expect nothing from him. In younger days, Cole Boone had been one of the finest cowboys the territory knew. He could rope a steer at full gallop, break a Mustang by sundown, and punch the ace clean out of a card at 30 paces. Men tipped their hats in respect, and women smiled when he passed. But that man lay buried alongside his family on that blood-soaked night. Inside the cabin was as bare as a monk's cell. A narrow cot with a thin blanket, a rough-hewn table, 2 chairs, one used, one forever empty. His Winchester hung over the door, his Colt .45 rested on a nail by the bed. Nothing more than tools to survive. Only one relic of the past remained, a small daguerreotype, on the mantel silver tarnished, but faces still visible. A woman with soft eyes, a boy with his father's stubborn jaw. When darkness swallowed the land, Cole lit a kerosene lamp. Its yellow glow pushed back the shadows, but never the memories. He heated beans over the fire, ate without tasting, then sat with a bottle of whiskey, not to drown himself, never that, but just enough to take the edge off remembering. The desert sang its nightly chorus, the distant cry of a coyote, the scurry of a pack rat in the rafters, the restless whistle of wind through broken shutters. He trusted those sounds more than voices. Animals killed to eat or to live, never for greed. He thought of the men who had shattered his life. Some were already in the ground, gunned down in saloons, or stretched by vigilante ropes. Others drifted to new ranges hunting new victims. But the one who set it all in motion, Silas Holt, the cattle baron who wanted his water rights, still lorded over Redemption Creek from his big house ruling the valley with coin and fear. Cole could have hunted him, could have burned for revenge. But what good would it do? It wouldn't raise June Belle or Tommy Lee. It would only spill more blood on ground already soaked with it. So instead he chose this half-living in a dying cabin. Punishment and penance rolled into one. He worked enough to eat, slept enough to work waiting for the desert to claim him too. Some nights when the wind moaned through the canyon, he swore he heard June Belle call his name. Some mornings when the light cut just right through the window, he could almost see Tommy Lee chasing dust outside. Illusions born of loneliness and sorrow. The ranch itself was ruin. Corral fences rotted and toppled tumbleweeds claimed what was left. The barn stood hollow, save for one aging gelding named Dust, his sole companion. The wells still bled water, but only in trickles, barely enough for man and beast. The garden June Belle had tended, the chicken coop Tommy Lee had hammered together, all swallowed by sand. Cole feared no death he'd walked with it too long. What he feared was hope. That cursed thing that tricks a man into believing tomorrow might change. Hope had killed his family. The hope that law would protect that right, could win over power. He'd learned better. Learned in blood tears and dirt shoveled on 2 coffins. As midnight neared, he went about his routine mechanical hollow, drilled into his bones. Rifle loaded, door barred, window shuttered against more than the wind. Then to his cot, lying flat, staring at the ceiling, waiting for a sleep that never came easy and never stayed long. He checked the window shutters pulled tight against more than the wind, then dropped onto his cot. Staring at the low ceiling, he braced for the kind of sleep that came late and left early. Outside, the desert stretched forever under a quilt of stars. Somewhere beyond those ridges, life carried on. Towns grew, children laughed, families carved out futures. But here on Sunset Ridge, in a cabin standing more from stubborn habit than nails, Cole Boone reduced his world to the simplest of terms: survive one more day, remember the dead, and wait for an ending that couldn't come fast enough. He didn't know that 3 days later, his solitude would be broken, shattered by the arrival of someone seeking refuge as desperately as he craved silence. He didn't know the same desert that had taken everything from him was about to set something unexpected on his doorstep. For now he only carried the weight of another day, endured another night, survived. 300 miles east, in the thriving town of Silver Falls, Ada Rose stood before a mirror, staring at the wedding gown hanging like a trap on the wardrobe door. White satin lace from across the ocean, worth more than most families would see in a year. In 2 days, she was to wear it and bind herself to Harlan Pike, a man 30 years older, rich off silver mines, with a heart colder than the ore he pulled from the earth. At 19, Ada's beauty stopped men in their tracks, hair the color of sunlit wheat, eyes blue as a winter sky, and a poise bred by careful schooling. Yet behind her gaze burned a desperation growing fiercer by the hour. Her father, Judge Kane, had bartered her future to cover gambling debts and grease his path in politics. Her mother, Martha Jo, too long beaten down by his temper, offered nothing but tears and tired words about duty. Ada had met Pike only 3 times. First at a Christmas ball, where he looked at her like stock on the auction block. Second at a stiff dinner, where he spoke only to her father, haggling over her like a deal. The third, when he cornered her in the garden, his breath sour with cigars, spelling out in chilling detail what he expected from a wife. That night, while the house slept and the clock struck 2, Ada made her choice. She gathered a few plain dresses, her mother's silver locket, the coins she had hidden away, and her father's derringer lifted from his study. She left behind the gown the jewels Pike had sent and the life forced upon her. The stable boy, Eli Cobb, sweet on her, saddled her mare without question. She pressed a coin into his palm, a finger to her lips, and vanished into the dark. By dawn, she was 20 miles west, riding the old stage road into the wilds. She had no map, no plan, only the need to run as far as possible from the cage waiting for her. 2 days she pushed hard, stopping only for the horses' sake, sleeping beneath the stars, eating bread and dried fruit. On the 3rd day, fate turned cruel. Her mare stepped into a prairie dog hole, bones snapping with a scream. Ada was thrown hard to the ground. Breathless, she staggered up to find the animal writhing pain etched in its cries. With shaking hands, she used one of the Derringer's 2 bullets to end its misery. Now she was on foot, at the mercy of a land that killed the unprepared. By noon, the sun beat her down, and her water was gone. Her fine boots meant for parlors, not desert trails, chewed her feet raw. By nightfall, she stumbled more than she walked. Her lips split, her vision swam. Mountains that had seemed close at dawn felt no nearer. She thought of Ruby May, only 14, next in line for their father's schemes. She thought of her mother locked in a marriage without love. She thought of women she'd known taught to bloom like flowers, then pressed flat between the pages of propriety. Better to die free under the open sky than live caged in Pike's mansion. When night dropped its curtain, so did the cold. The desert that had burned her by day now cut her to the bone. Huddled behind rocks in her torn dress, she listened to sounds, wind or wolves she couldn't tell. 1 bullet left. She wondered if it would be for protection or mercy. By dawn, she could barely stand. Tongue like leather limbs, heavy as stone, she forced herself on. She followed what might be a trail or only a mirage of hope. The red cliffs shimmered, and she found herself on her knees without knowing how. Then she saw it. A shape against the haze, too straight to be natural, a cabin. Weathered, leaning, but real. To Ada, it looked like a palace. She staggered to the porch, fists pounding weakly on the door. "Please," she rasped through split lips. "Please, someone." Inside, Cole Boone froze at his breakfast table. No one ever came here, not in 5 years. He reached for his rifle, checked the load, and edged to the window. What he saw made him pause. A young woman, barely standing, her dress torn, her face burned by sun, swaying like she belonged more to the dust than the living. Instinct told him to bolt the door, keep the world out. But when she crumpled to the porch like a rag doll, something inside him, something left over from the man he once was, refused to let her die there. He opened the door, slow rifle still in hand, and knelt beside her. She was alive, but only just. Skin fever-hot, lips cracked and bleeding. Up close he could tell she had been beautiful once. Now she looked like a ghost, a soul blown in on desert winds. "Water," she whispered, eyes closed. "Please." Cole lifted her as if she weighed nothing, shocked by her frailty. He carried her inside. He laid her gently on his cot and fetched a dipper of water from the barrel. Lifting her head, he let her sip in slow trickles, steadying her as she tried to gulp too fast. Too much, too quick, could kill her as surely as none at all. "Who are you?" he muttered, though he knew she was far beyond answering. "What in God's name are you doing out here?" She murmured something faint. Maybe a name, maybe fevered nonsense. Her ruined dress and once fine boots told him she came from money. A runaway, Cole guessed. A woman desperate enough to gamble with the desert, rather than face whatever fate chased her. He stood over her, torn between the instinct to guard his solitude and the tug of something he thought long buried. He'd built his life around being alone, needing no one, letting no one need him. And now fate had thrown this half-dead stranger onto his porch, a woman who would surely die without him. The smart thing would be to hoist her onto dust, ride her to Redemption Creek, and hand her over to the doctor. Let her troubles become someone else's burden. But then the memory of June Belle flashed through him. She'd believed in kindness, in helping those in need. She would have been ashamed of the hard man he'd become. He could almost hear her voice whispering in the room, "Cole, we help folks who can't help themselves. That's what makes us human." With a weary sigh from deep in his soul, Cole Boone began the work of saving Ada Rose's life, unaware that in doing so he'd taken the first step toward saving his own. For 3 days, she drifted between fevered dreams and shallow breaths. Cole tended her with the clumsy care of a man who'd long forgotten gentleness, cooling her brow with damp cloths, forcing broth between her cracked lips. He knew too well how easily heat sickness could turn to death. At night, when her fever peaked, she cried out names Ruby May, Mama, sometimes sobbing in delirium. On the 4th morning, her eyes opened clear. The first thing she saw was Cole slumped in a chair beside the cot, exhaustion carved deep in his weathered face. When he realized she was watching, he stiffened, the brief softness hardening to stone. "You're awake," he said, rising to fetch water. Her throat was raw, but she managed a nod and took the cup from his hand, sipping slow this time, under his steady gaze. Finally, she whispered, "Thank you." He gave a short nod. "You nearly died. Another hour in that sun." He didn't finish. "What's your name?" She hesitated, then spoke low. "Ada. Ada Rose." She caught the suspicion in his eyes. "Running," she added. "Just running." He didn't press, and she was grateful. The days that followed took on a rough rhythm. Cole supplied food, water, and new bandages for her blistered feet, then kept his distance. He slept on the floor, giving her the cot, and spoke only when necessary. Ada, still weak, but mending, watched him with growing curiosity. He moved about the cabin with a kind of rugged precision, each task spare and deliberate. At dawn, he tended his horse, checked traps, and performed the endless chores that kept a man alive out here. She noticed how his jaw tightened whenever her gaze lingered on the daguerreotype above the mantel, how he turned away when she offered thanks. "I can leave once I'm stronger," she said one evening over a meal of beans and biscuit. "Leave for where?" His voice was flat, all practicality. "Nearest town's 15 miles. You planning to walk it?" "I have money. I can pay you to take me. Keep your money." He pushed back from the table. "When you're healed, I'll get you to Redemption Creek. Till then, you stay put." That night, Ada lay awake, listening to the wind whistle through the cracks. Gruff though he was, this man had saved her life. His hands, so rough, had been surprisingly gentle when tending her wounds. But she saw something broken in him, something that mirrored her own. He was a soul who had chosen isolation over more pain. As her strength returned, she insisted on helping. Cole grumbled, but she persisted, mending his clothes with neat stitches, sorting supplies, even trying to cook. When she burned the beans black, her first attempt, she braced for anger. Instead, he scraped the pot clean, showed her how to manage the fire. "You've never cooked before?" He observed not a question. "No," she admitted softly. "There were always servants." He glanced at her patched dress, worn thin from travel. Rich girl. Figured as much. "What's a rich girl running from?" Her hands stilled on the mending. "A marriage. To a man." She couldn't finish. His face darkened, eyes full of a hard understanding. "I see." Silence stretched as they sat on the porch watching the sunset bleed red across the rocks. Then, for the first time, Cole spoke unprompted. "This place used to be different," he said quietly. "Had cattle, horses, gardens out back. my wife. She could make anything grow even in this soil. Ada waited, sensing the weight of his words. June Belle, he said roughly, the name catching in his throat. And our boy, Tommy Lee. He was 5 when... His voice broke. I'm sorry, Ada whispered. He nodded toward the empty land. Range war. Powerful men wanted our water rights. When I wouldn't sell, they came at night. I was in town getting supplies. By the time I got back... His words trailed off into the silence, heavy with ghosts. By the time the words left his mouth, silence stretched heavy between them, thick with ghosts both could feel. Ada Rose thought of her own kind of losses, not to death, but to indifference to a world that measured her as property to be bartered away. Different graves, but graves just the same. Is that why you stay out here alone? She asked quietly. A man's supposed to protect what's his, Cole Boone said bitterly. I failed. This. He motioned at the broken-down cabin. This is what I deserve. You saved me, Ada whispered. That's different. Is it? Her eyes searched his face, and for the first time he really looked at her. She saw the fight in him between the man he once was and the ghost he'd become. You need rest, he muttered sharply, pushing to his feet. Another week, maybe 2, and you'll be strong enough to travel. But even as he said it, she caught the reluctance in his voice. She hadn't just brought need to this place. She'd brought life. She burned food, hummed soft tunes while she worked, asked questions about the desert that made him see it through fresh eyes. Once he'd caught her feeding crumbs to a bold pack rat. Instead of scolding her, he'd almost smiled. For Ada, the peace was unexpected. No corsets, no society calls, no father dictating her every step. Just survival's steady rhythm, and the company of a man who demanded nothing but that she heal. She learned to read the sky's ration water like treasure-find beauty in a land that had nearly killed her. One night a coyote howled close to the cabin. Ada startled awake, but Cole was already on his feet, rifle in hand, standing between her and the door. Just a coyote, he said, when it called again. They won't bother us. Yet he didn't lower the gun until the howling faded, and Ada realized his protection came from more than duty. He'd let her inside his walls, both the cabins and the ones around his heart, and that frightened him more than any predator. Cole, she whispered into the darkness, what they did to your family, it wasn't your fault. Go to sleep, Ada. But she heard the crack in his voice, the first fracture in the armor he wore like a second skin. 2 broken souls in a broken place. And maybe that was exactly why they fit. As sleep finally claimed her, Ada made a decision when the time came she would fight to stay. Not because she feared what lay beyond, but because here she had found what she didn't know. She was looking for a place where she could simply be. And a man who had learned the hardest way that the most precious things were also the most fragile. That fragile peace shattered 2 weeks later beneath a pitiless sun. Cole had ridden to Redemption Creek for supplies, leaving Ada alone for the first time. She used the quiet to wash clothes, humming a half-remembered hymn, but the sound of hoofbeats made her freeze. 3 riders crested the ridge, dark against the white-hot sky. Even at a distance, their posture, their weapons glinting at their sides, told her they weren't neighbors. They were hunters, and she was the quarry. Her pulse thundered as she bolted inside, barring the door with shaking hands. Through a crack in the shutters, she watched them approach. The leader, lean with pale eyes and scars carved deep, sat his horse, like a man born to violence. The others flanked him like wolves, their hands close to iron. They stopped just beyond rifle range. The leader called out, smooth as oil. "Miss Rose, we know you're in there. Your daddy's worried sick. Harlan Pike, too. They sent us to fetch you home safe and sound." The words slid sweet, but the menace beneath was sharp as barbed wire. Ada's fingers closed around Cole's spare revolver, heavy and unfamiliar. "Come on out," the leader coaxed, riding closer. "No sense making this harder. You've had your adventure. Time to do your duty." "I'm not going back," Ada called, shocked by the steel in her own voice. "Tell Pike he'll have to find another bride." The man's false smile faltered. "Now that ain't very ladylike. Pike paid good money for you. He don't take kindly to having his property stolen." Property. The word lit fire in Ada's chest. "I'm no man's property. Leave now." "Or what?" The leader chuckled. "You'll shoot us with that hog leg you can barely lift, little girl playing frontier woman. This ain't a game, sweetheart." One of the others, younger and meaner, spoke up. "Buck, there's men's clothes on the line. Big ones. She ain't alone." Buck Mason, the leader, studied the cabin, eyes narrowing. "That's so. Well, whoever he is, he ain't here. Saw a lone rider headed toward town earlier. Means we got time to get acquainted." They swung down from their saddles, spreading wide to flank the cabin. Ada's hands trembled as she checked the revolver, 6 bullets against 3 killers. The derringer in her pocket held only 1 shot, her last card. She thought of Cole riding back to find her gone, or worse, her body cooling on the porch. He'd blame himself, add her to the ghosts that already haunted him. No, she hissed to herself. Fierce, unyielding. Not today. The youngest rider edged toward the cabin, the others covering him. Ada rose, waited until he drew close, then fired straight through the door. The shot caught Clyde Rourke in the shoulder, spinning him with a curse. The recoil nearly dropped her, but she held her ground. "She shot me," Clyde howled, clutching at the blood. "The witch shot me." "Fall back," Buck Mason barked. They scrambled for cover behind the busted corral, the wounded man groaning in the dirt. "All right, Miss Rose," Buck shouted. "You want to play hard? We'll play hard." Gunfire tore into the cabin bullets, splitting boards and showering Ada with splinters. She dropped low, crawling across the floor, as lead chewed through the walls. Then silence fell, broken only by Buck's voice rallying his men. She knew what was coming next. They'd rush her, and she couldn't hold them all. Think, what would Cole Boone do? Her eyes locked on the kerosene lamp. A desperate thought struck. She knocked it over fuel spreading across the dry boards. One match could set the whole place ablaze, but in this drought, fire could run wild for miles. "Getting mighty quiet in there," Buck called. "You ready to be reasonable?" Ada ignored him, rifling through Cole's ammunition, shoving cartridges into her pockets. She had run before, but not now. This cabin, this rough, fragile place had become home. Through the shutter she saw them creeping again, moving to flank. Clyde hung back pale from blood loss, but Buck and Zeke Webb pressed forward. Ada braced the revolver on the sill. Her first shot went wide. The second forced them down behind rocks. "Enough," Buck roared. "Burn her out." Zeke broke toward the barn. Horror clenched Ada's gut as flames licked the old timbers. Cole's horse dust was trapped. She couldn't abandon him, but leaving meant capture. Smoke curled into the room, choking her. Then came the sound she'd prayed for, hoofbeats pounding fast across the desert. A single rider. Cole. Zeke. "Watch the trail," Buck snapped. But Cole didn't come by the trail. He stormed over the ridge like vengeance itself, rifle already leveled. His first shot hit Zeke square in the chest. The second dropped Clyde as he fumbled for his horse. Buck spun, firing wild, but Cole was off his mount in a blink, moving with deadly precision, using rocks for cover. This was the man hardened by range wars, raids, and loss. The fighter he'd buried with June Belle and Tommy Lee now rose again. "This ain't your business," Mr. Buck shouted as he reloaded. "We got papers. We're here legal collectin' what belongs to Harlan Pike. She belongs to no man." Cole's voice was cold iron. "You've got one chance right out now. Can't do that, friend. There's money in it. Good money. Then you'll die for it." The last exchange was brutal and swift. Buck tried to flank, but Cole had seen every trick before. 2 shots clean and merciless, and Buck Mason hit the dirt for good. The barn crackled behind them, smoke rolling thick. Cole checked each body, making sure none would rise again, then turned to the cabin. "Ada, are you hurt?" She staggered out, revolver trembling in her grip. "The barn dust. He's safe. I let him out to graze this morning." Relief washed over him as he caught her, her knees buckling under the weight of what she'd faced. "You did good," he said, voice low but firm. "Held him off on your own." "I was so scared," she whispered into his chest. "Fear's no shame. You stood your ground. That's what counts." His arms tightened, and she felt the tremor in him too. "When I saw that smoke..." He stopped, but she understood what he didn't finish. They stood there, dust settling, smoke curling, corpses cooling in the dirt, holding on to each other like the last 2 souls in the world. The walls Cole had built for years lay in ruins, broken not by bullets, but by the need to protect what mattered. "There'll be more," Ada murmured finally. "Harlan Pike won't stop, I know." Cole pulled back, his eyes no longer dulled with grief but blazing with the warrior awakened. "But they'll have to come through me first. And I'm done letting anyone take what's mine." The possessive edge should have frightened her, yet it brought a safety she'd never known in Judge Kane's house or under Pike's shadow. This wasn't ownership. It was partnership. Protection freely given, gratefully accepted. As the barn collapsed in sparks, they worked together, dragging bodies clear, salvaging what little they could, steeling themselves for the storm that would surely follow. The quiet days were gone, but in fire and blood they'd forged something stronger than either had dared to hope. Cole Boone buried the bounty hunters in shallow, nameless graves well away from the cabin. Their horses were sold off quietly through trusted hands in Redemption Creek, the coins used for cartridges, sacks of flour and lumber to shore up weak walls. Every dawn could bring more killers. Both of them knew it. Even the land itself seemed set against them. A sandstorm raged through the valley for 2 straight days, turning the world into a choking brown wall. They huddled inside rags tied across their mouths, listening to the wind scream like a demon. When it finally passed, they found the well nearly smothered in grit. Hours of back-breaking labor clawed it open again, only to find the water coming slow and scarce. "We should leave, Ada," Rose said one evening, pushing beans around her tin plate. Provisions were thinning, but stepping into town meant exposure, meant her face might match the wanted broadsides Harlan Pike had surely nailed across half the territory. "Find somewhere else. Somewhere he can't reach us." Cole shook his head. "There ain't anywhere Pike's money won't reach. Men like him got friends in every saloon and courthouse." His gaze swept the cabin, scarred but standing. "This is my land. June Belle's buried here. Tommy Lee too. I won't run from their graves." Ada said nothing more. She understood this bleak ridge was all that was left of his old life. Asking him to leave it would be asking him to abandon them again. "Then we make our stand here," she said simply. That night the desert turned cruel with cold. The firewood pile was near gone. Cole gave Ada his blanket, but she heard his teeth clatter in the dark. Without hesitation, she rose from the cot, spread both blankets near the dying fire, and looked at him. "What are you doing?" he asked. Being practical, she answered, lying down and holding the covers open. "We'll freeze separate. Together, maybe we don't." He hesitated so long she thought he'd refuse. Then, careful as if she might break, he stretched out beside her. They lay back to back, sharing warmth, but stiff with distance. "I won't break, Cole," she whispered into the dark. "I know," he rasped. It had simply been so long since he'd allowed anyone this close, since he'd taken even this much comfort. Ada understood. They breathed in the quiet together. Slowly she felt the rigidity leave him, the wall around his body easing just a little. Somewhere in the night, she woke to find his arm draped around her, her back pressed to his chest. By rights, she should have felt cornered. Instead, she felt safer than she had in her father's grand house, or Pike's looming shadow. She let her eyes close again. By morning, they separated without a word, but the distance they'd kept was gone. In the days after, his hand brushed hers at the table, and neither pulled away. Ada caught his eyes, lingering an expression that made her pulse quicken. 5 days after the ambush under a merciless sun, Ada reached a breaking point. Sweat caked her, the dust clung to her skin, and washing in a basin wasn't enough. She needed to feel clean human again. "I'm going to wash," she said, gathering their last clean cloth. Cole nodded, turning his back out of habit to give her privacy. They'd built such small courtesies to keep dignity alive in the tight quarters. But seeing him stand guard even here, protecting lines she hadn't asked for, something inside her snapped. "Cole," she called softly. He half turned, still keeping his gaze low. "What is it? You need something?" She drew a breath, her voice unsteady but fierce. "I need you to understand. Out there in my father's world, I was currency. Judge Kane traded me for power. Harlan Pike bought me like stock. Even the men who courted me only saw a pretty face, a family name, a womb for heirs. Not me. Never Ada." His jaw tightened. "Why tell me this?" His voice carried strain. "Because you're the only man who's ever looked at me as myself. You saved me without asking for payment. You taught me to shoot to build a fire to survive, not like I was fragile china, but like I was capable. You sleep cold rather than assume a right to my warmth." She stepped closer, heart pounding. "I've been running my whole life, Cole. Running from cages, from men who thought they owned me. But I'm not running from you." He turned, then gray eyes dark as storm clouds, heavy with an emotion he could no longer hide. "Ada, you don't know what you're saying. I'm broken. Hollow. I've got nothing left to give. I'm not asking for anything," she cut him off. Voice trembling but strong. "I'm offering. Because I choose to." She lifted her chin, her truth spilling out with a courage that surprised even her. "All my life, someone else decided who I belonged to, Judge Kane Harlan Pike Society. But here now I decide. And I choose you, Cole Boone, if you'll have me." The silence between them grew heavy, thick with possibility. Cole's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. "You don't understand," he rasped. "When I lost June Belle, lost Tommy Lee, something inside me died. I can protect you, yes. Kill for you. Lay down my life if I have to. But I don't know if I can feel again. Love again. You deserve more than a ghost." Ada stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat rolling from him. "Then let me bring you back," she whispered. "Let me try." Her fingertips brushed the rough line of his jaw. He shut his eyes as though it hurt, but he didn't pull away. "I'll give myself to you." She breathed the words finally free. "Not because I'm forced, not because duty demands it, but because I want to. Because in this broken place with our broken hearts, maybe we can make something whole." His hand caught hers grip, almost desperate. "If I let you in," he warned, "and something happens to you." "Something already happened," she said softly. "I found you. I found home. That's worth any risk." He searched her face for a long, aching moment, and she saw the exact instant his walls gave way. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair, his body shaking with years of contained grief and longing. "Ada," he whispered. Her name was a prayer, a surrender. They held each other as the desert wind whispered around the cabin, two scarred souls daring to believe in hope. Not healing yet, that would take time, but hope. That maybe life could be more than survival. When they finally drew apart, both their faces were wet with tears. Cole cupped her cheek with a tenderness that felt endless. "You're sure life here is hard. Dangerous. You could do better." "I could do easier," she corrected. "But I couldn't do better. This is my choice, Cole. You are my choice." He kissed her, then gentle, reverent avow without words. When they parted, the desert no longer looked so barren, nor the future so dark. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. 3 weeks passed in a strange, taut peace. Cole and Ada fell into a rhythm shaped by their bond. They worked shoulder to shoulder by day, and at night shared the narrow cot, drawing comfort from one another. But Harlan Pike's shadow stretched long. The storm was coming. The first warning came with Cole's dawn patrol. Each morning he rode the perimeter, scanning for trouble. That day he found it hoof prints, several horses circling at a distance, scouts keeping watch. He spurred hard back to the cabin. Ada was bent over the small garden she'd coaxed from the unforgiving dirt. One look at his face, and she straightened. How many, she asked, setting aside the water bucket. 6, maybe 7. Careful riders, keeping out of rifle range, testing us. Ada's jaw set firm. Then we'd better be ready. The day became a flurry of preparation. Cole checked weapons, counted ammunition, reinforced firing angles at the windows. Ada, now steady with a rifle, filled every container with water. Together, they turned the cabin into a fortress. By sundown, the desert glowed red and gold, and the riders appeared. A line of men moving with the confidence of wolves. Ada counted 8 more than the tracks had promised. At their head rode a man in a black coat, despite the heat sitting his horse like a king surveying his kingdom. Harlan Pike. Ada breathed, knuckles whitening around her rifle. The riders halted within shouting distance. Pike nudged his horse forward. Ada got her first clear look at him since the night she fled. He had aged not from time, but from fury, face gaunt, eyes burning with obsession. "Miss Rose." His voice rang clear in the desert stillness. "I've come to claim what's mine. You've led me a merry chase, but the game's over." Cole stepped onto the porch rifle, cradled ready. "The lady made her choice. Pike. She stays here." Pike's cold gaze pinned him. "Ah, the hermit rancher. Cole Boone, isn't it? I've heard of you. Heard of your family, too. Tragic what happened to them." His smile cut sharp as a blade. Would be a shame if history repeated itself. Cole's face turned to stone. His voice was steel. "Try it. See what happens." "Oh, I intend to." Pike lifted a hand, gesturing to his men. "You see, Boone, I'm a businessman. I know the value of things. That girl cost me dearly her father's debts, the wedding, the humiliation of being left at the altar. And I mean to collect. I'm here to collect what I paid for. I'm not property." Ada Rose shouted from the window, her voice cutting sharp across the open ground. "I'm not something to be bought or sold." Harlan. Pike's gaze snapped to her. His eyes glittered with a hunger that made her skin crawl. "Everything has a price, my dear. Your father understood that. He signed the papers, took my money. You belong to me as surely as if I'd bought you on the block. The only thing you'll get here is a bullet Cole Boone warned from the porch. Perhaps? Pike leaned back in his saddle, calm as a rattler before it struck. But think on this. I'm a patient man. My men are patient, too. How much food do you have in there? How much water? How many cartridges? His grin was poison. When you run dry, when you're starving and weak, we'll come in. Unless what Ada demanded. Unless you use your head. Come with me now willingly, and I'll see to it Mr. Boone lives. I'll even pay him for his trouble. Say, $500. Fair price for room and board. The insult hung foul in the air. Ada saw Cole's knuckles whiten on his rifle, saw the rage rising in him. She touched his arm, steadying him. Counteroffer, she called. You ride out now and we let you live. That's fair for a man who sends hired killers after women. Pike's smile twisted. Those men exceeded their orders. They were meant to bring you back unharmed. Tell that to their widows, Cole said coldly. Tension stretched tight as wire. One of Pike's gun hands shifted in his saddle, his horse sidestepping nervously. Cole tracked him with his rifle, and everyone knew the first shot would start the storm. I'll give you till morning, Pike said at last. If Miss Rose hasn't seen reason, we'll finish this the hard way. And Boone, when my men are done, what happened to your family will look merciful. That threat snapped something inside Cole. His rifle came up the crack, splitting the desert air. Pike's hat flew from his head, a clean hole through the crown. The gun hands lurched for their weapons, but Pike raised his hand, face pale, yet composed. Hold! He dismounted slowly, retrieved the hat, and studied the damage with a forced calm. Fine shooting, Boone. But you've only so many bullets. We'll see you at dawn. They wheeled their horses, retreating to a rise half a mile off. Soon their campfires pricked the night, a line of flames against the darkness, like a constellation of threats. Inside, Cole leaned against the wall, haunted. He's right, he said, hollowly. I couldn't stop it before. What makes me think, don't? Ada dropped to her knees before him, cupping his face in her hands. That was different. You were alone. You're not alone anymore. This time we're ready. 8 men, Ada. Hired killers. Pike won't stop. He'll keep coming. Then we stop him, she said fiercely. I won't let him take me back. I won't let him break you. We've both run long enough. It ends here. He looked at her, the woman who had stumbled into his life half dead, and somehow breathed life back into him. You're not afraid? Terrified, she admitted, but more afraid of losing what we've found. Aren't you? He pulled her close, inhaling the scent of her hair, clinging to her warmth. June Belle would have liked you, he whispered. She had the same fire, the same refusal to quit. Then honor her by living, Ada whispered back. By fighting for us. They spent the night in shifts, watching the enemy's fires burn against the horizon, each ember a reminder of the battle, waiting with dawn. Between those long hours, they shared whispered plans and silent vows. When the first light touched the sky, Cole loaded every gun, laid ammunition within easy reach, and filled the barrel of water Ada had insisted on keeping inside. It crowded the room, but it might save them. As the sun bled over the horizon, Ada touched his arm. Whatever happens these weeks with you have been worth it, all. Worth the fear, the running, everything. You gave me freedom, Cole. Real freedom, the freedom to choose my own life. He kissed her long and deep, pouring every word he couldn't say into her mouth. When they parted, his eyes burned clear. Then let's make sure you get to keep it. Both of us. Together. The desert flamed with sunrise, And with it came the promise of war. In the distance, movement stirred through Harlan Pike's camp. The final reckoning had come, and both Cole Boone and Ada Rose knew that by the time the sun bled out of the sky, their fate would be sealed. Freedom or death, love or loss. There was no middle ground, but the assault didn't break with the dawn as expected. Instead, Pike held his men back, gnawing at their nerves with silence. By noon, under a merciless sun, the strategy revealed itself. He meant to bake them out. The heat doubled their thirst, and every swallow of water came at a cost. "He's sharper than I gave him credit for," Cole muttered, sweat streaking the dust on his face. "He's waiting for us to weaken." Still, the delay gave them time. Ada studied the enemy camp from the shadows, her eyes sharp, her mind quick. She marked the guard rotations where the horses were tied, in a shaded draw the placement of riflemen. She sketched patterns in the dust across the cabin floor. There she pointed. All their horses penned in close. Spook them, and chaos follows. They'd come at us scattered instead of steady. Cole studied her crude map, a grim smile tugging his lips. "You'd have made a hell of a soldier. I had a hell of a teacher," she answered, checking her rifle again with steady hands. Late afternoon, a dust cloud rose on the eastern horizon. Ada's heart dropped reinforcements. That would end it. But as the riders drew closer, Cole raised his field glasses. His expression shifted. "Well, I'll be damned." "What is it?" Ada asked. He handed her the glasses. "Look at the lead rider, the one wearing the star." She squinted. 5 men rode hard weapons slung. At their head, a grizzled lawman she knew from Redemption Creek. "Marshal Tate," she breathed. Cole stepped onto the porch rifle in hand, but lowered. The party halted between the cabin and Pike's camp. Tate rode forward, slow hands open. "Boone," he called, his voice even. "Miss Rose, mind if we parley?" "Come ahead, Marshal," Cole answered. Tate reined close, his weathered face unreadable. "Got some interesting mail yesterday. Word from the federal office. A certain Harlan Pike wanted in Colorado for fraud claim jumping, and maybe worse. Murder. Got a warrant right here." Ada's chest filled with hope, but Cole stayed wary. "Since when do you care about warrants?" "Since Pike threatened me for refusing to ride in his little huntin' party." Tate spat tobacco into the dirt. "Man figures his money makes him untouchable. I'm here to remind him it don't." Shouts rose from Pike's camp. Men scrambled, weapons lifted. Pike himself rode forward, face flushed with rage. "Marshal Tate, I paid you good money to stay clear of this." "That you did," Tate said coolly. "And I'll stay clear of your business with the lady. But this warrant, that's my business now. You can come along peaceful, or we do it the hard way." Pike's laugh was harsh. 5 men against 8. "You're outnumbered, Marshal." "Maybe." Tate shifted in his saddle hand, resting on his Colt. "But me and my men, we're law. Your boys open fire, they'll hang for it. Question is, how many of them are ready to die for your wounded pride?" The air went tight as a drawn bow. Ada saw doubt flicker across the faces of Pike's gun hands. Fighting a rancher and a woman was one thing. Standing against the badge was another. Then it broke. One of Pike's men nerves shot, went for his pistol. Tate's deputy dropped him clean before he cleared leather. The gunshot spooked the horses penned in the draw. They bolted in a frenzy, men cursing as they tried to hold them. 3 gun hands broke ranks to chase after them, leaving Pike's line ragged. Now Cole shouted. He and Ada opened fire from the cabin, their shots sharp and measured. Tate and his men dove for cover, their guns joining the fray. Caught in a crossfire, Pike's crew faltered. Pike himself rode the chaos like a devil, wheeling his mount, trying to rally them. "Stand and fight, you cowards! There's money in it, but money meant nothing to dead men." 2 more gun hands fell under the withering fire, and the rest broke, scattering into the desert, leaving Pike cursing their names, his fury echoing across the dying light. In the sudden stillness, Harlan Pike sat alone astride his horse. His fine coat was dusted over his face, twisted with fury and disbelief. Marshal Tate stepped from cover, pistol drawn. "Harlan Pike, you're under arrest. Drop your weapons." Pike's eyes cut toward the cabin locking on Ada Rose framed in the window. "This isn't over," he snarled. "You think you've won? I've got lawyers, I've got friends in high places. I'll be free in a week." His words faltered when Ada stepped onto the porch, Cole Boone's steady hand on her shoulder. "No," she said, voice ringing clear. "It is over. I'll testify to the forced marriage, the men you sent, all of it. And unlike my father, I can't be bought or bullied." You little Pike lunged for the derringer hidden in his coat. 3 shots rang out together, Cole's, Ada's, and Tate's. Pike toppled from the saddle, the pistol clattering from his grip. He hit the dust, gasping blood seeping into the thirsty ground. Tate swung down, checked the body, then looked back at the cabin. Self-defense. All 3 of us saw him draw. His eyes lingered on Cole and Ada. "You 2 figuring on staying here?" Cole and Ada traded a glance. The barn was ash, the well half-choked, the cabin scarred, but the land stood. And more important, so did they. "For now," Cole said quietly. "This is home." Tate nodded. "Maybe won't be so lonesome as you think. Town's growing. Could use folks like you. Think on it." He turned to his men. "Round up the bodies. Long haul back to town." As the lawmen worked, Ada leaned into Cole's arms. "Is it really over?" "This part is," he said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "There'll be papers, maybe a trial for the ones left standing. But Pike's gone. You're free." "We're free," she corrected, her eyes fierce. Together they stood on the porch, while the sun bled across the desert in gentler colors. The graves on the hill were no longer lonely. The living stood watch, now honoring them not with endless grief, but with life renewed. "We'll need a new barn," Ada said, practical, even with tears in her eyes. "And someday, we'll need more room in the cabin." "If," she faltered, flushing. "If Cole asked, though his smile showed he knew. If we're to raise a family here." He turned her to face him, his eyes shining with emotion too deep to speak. June Belle would have wanted that. Life carrying on. Children's laughter again. "Yes," Ada whispered. "Someday." They went inside as darkness fell, leaving the desert to its eternal silence. But the cabin no longer felt like a tomb. It was a home again, scarred but alive, sheltering a love born out of ruin and stubbornly blooming against all odds. At dawn, they would begin rebuilding. Tonight, they held each other, 2 souls who had fought through darkness and found a love worth dying for, and more than that worth living for. The desert stars wheeled above, timeless and cold, but beneath them everything had changed. Where once there had been only survival, now there was hope. Where once there had been only ghosts, now there was promise. The trial in Silver Falls lasted 3 long. Ada sat tall in this witness box, ignoring the whispers that rippled through the crowded courtroom. She spoke plain, telling of the forced betrothal, her flight the killer's Pike had sent after her. Judge Kane sat in the gallery, his face twisted with shame and fury, powerless before the evidence. Pike's letters testimony from a surviving gun-hand marshal, Tate's sworn word. The verdict was clear. Pike's estate dissolved, his holdings seized. Ada felt no triumph, only release. She had faced down her past and broken it. At last she was free to claim her future. Outside, her sister Ruby May waited with tears bright in her eyes. "Ada, I was so afraid for you." They embraced, and Ada marveled at how much her younger sister had grown since the day she'd fled. "Are you safe?" Ada asked urgently. "Mother's gone," Ruby whispered. "She left Father after the truth came out, his debts, his lies. We're living with Aunt Margaret now." She finally found her strength. Ada hugged her tighter, joy and sorrow mingling. Her rebellion had shaken the foundations, freeing more than herself. "Come visit," Ada urged. "When you can. I want you to meet Cole to see our home." Ruby's eyes shone with curiosity, not fear. "I'd love to." Cole waited with the horses, uneasy, in stiff town clothes, but steady at Ada's side. He had testified to his quiet honesty, swaying even the skeptics. Now he helped her into the saddle, their future waiting down the long trail. "No regrets?" he asked, as Silver Falls fell behind them. "None," Ada said firmly. "That life is finished. Ours is just beginning." They rode through shifting country green valleys, giving way to red rock and sunburned mesas, back toward the land that was theirs. Along the trail, they stopped at a little chapel in a mining camp, where a traveling preacher bound them as man and wife before God and law. No fine dresses, no crowded pews, just a simple vow witnessed by strangers. Yet to Ada Rose it was more sacred than any grand wedding her family might have arranged. When they finally crested the ridge above their ranch, they reined in, stunned. The cabin stood as they'd left it, but the place was alive. Men setting beams for a new barn, women hanging laundry on fresh lines. In a rough corral stood Marshal Tate's horse, among others. "What in blazes?" Cole muttered. They rode down to find half of Dust Creek lending their hands. Tate tipped his hat, grinning at their faces. "Figured you two deserved a proper homecoming. Folks here remember what it's like to need a new start." Cora Lee stepped from the cabin floor, dusting her apron. "Stocked your pantry. Can't build a life on beans alone." At the barn, Hank Doolin gestured to the new frame rising. "Should be done by week's end. Mountain timber stronger than what you had." Ada's eyes brimmed. This was community not for gain, but because it was right. She dismounted, shaking hands, hugging women who welcomed her as one of their own, despite her past as a runaway bride. At sundown, the helpers rode off with promises to return. The cabin was no longer battered, but renewed curtains at the windows, a quilt on the bed, preserves on the shelf. "I never thought," Cole's voice caught. "After I lost everything, I believed I'd never have neighbors, friends, never have a wife." Ada finished softly. "A wife, a partner, a reason to believe tomorrow might be better," he said, pulling her close. They stood on the porch as stars lit the vast sky. A coyote's cry floated across the desert, not lonely now, but wild and free. Through the months they worked shoulder to shoulder. The barn rose strong, Ada's garden spread green across the dust, and Cole bought a few mares to raise horses again. What had been a place of ghosts slowly came alive like desert after rain. Ada wrote to Martha Jo and Ruby May, sharing joy in small things, the first harvest, the birth of a foal, the way Cole laughed now, easy and often. That fall, Ruby came to stay 2 weeks, already dreaming of returning when her schooling was done. One cold December night, snow drifted over the red rocks. Ada stood at the window, hand resting on her still, flat stomach, holding the secret she would share that evening. New life was growing where once there had been only laws. Flowers bloomed on the graves of June Belle and Tommy Lee, not forgotten, but honored by life continuing. When Cole came in from the barn, boots dusted white, she met him with supper and a kiss. "I love you," he said, words once hard, but now natural. "And I love you," she whispered, taking his hand to her belly. "Both of us." Joy broke over him like sunrise after the longest night. He dropped to his knees, overcome tears shining on his face. "Really? By summer? 3 of us?" She laughed as he swept her up, spinning her across the cabin, their laughter filling every corner. Outside, snow softened the harsh land, but inside there was warmth, love, and the promise of tomorrow. They had traveled long roads through sorrow and violence, but had come out unbroken. Ada thought back to the words she had once whispered, "I'll give myself to you." What began as desperation had become a vow, a partnership freely chosen. Together they had built something strong enough to weather any storm. That night, under the endless western stars, Cole Boone and Ada Rose held each other close. No longer 2 broken souls, but one whole, ready for whatever trails lay ahead. And for the first time in years, the cabin on Sunset Ridge was not a tomb of memories, but a living home bright with hope. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you.